Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about numbers, and I'm going to just introduce you to working with some numbers in Swift. So the two most common types of numbers you're going to be working with are integers and doubles. So I'm going to go ahead and create two numbers here, number 1, and we're going to say this is of type int, and we're going to give it a value of, let's say, 0, and number 2, and this is of type double, and we're going to give a value of 0.0. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. The Swift compiler really does most of the hard work and underneath the hood work when it comes to doing any sort of arithmetic or mathematical work. But I do want to show you a few things here. So if we were to say var sum, so I'm going to create a brand new variable, call it sum, and I'm going to add number 1 and number 2. I'm gonna get an error here. Give it a second, yeah. So it says binary, the plus sign, the operator plus sign cannot be applied to operands of type int and double. Swift is an extremely safe language, and you can't add an int and a double because this is an integer and this is double. So what we're gonna have to do, explicit conversions here. And what that means is we're gonna have to convert one of these two variables to a type that that is the same as the other variables. So number 1 is an integer. What I could do here is I could convert number 2 to an integer. And the way I do that is I type in int before, and I put the variable in parentheses. And now I'm converting number 2 to an int. And maybe I should probably change these numbers to something something better so we could see. There we go. So I've converted number 2, which is 3.8, to an int, and then I added a 5. So our answer is 8. Now you might be thinking, why 8? Why is it not 8.8? Well, because the answer is an int. Ints can't hold floating point numbers or decimals. They could only hold whole numbers. So it's 8. You might be thinking, okay, well, why isn't it 9 then? Because 8.8 is closer to 9. You have to remember, when you do this, you're not actually rounding. You're not following the mathematical rules of rounding. You're actually just cutting off the decimal. So if this was 0.99 or 0.01, it's irrelevant. It'll cut it off. It's not rounding, it's cutting off whatever's after the decimal. So this is a 3 when I converted it to an int, and I'm adding here to 5. Conversely, what I could have done here is this. I could have converted this to a double, and now number 1 is a double, and I'm adding number 1 and number 2, and the answer here is 8.8, 8.80. Not gonna talk about why you have all these many zeros, but really all you need to know is 8.8. So what's happening here is number 1 is being converted to a double. Well, how do you convert a 5, an int, to a double, a whole number? Essentially, this converted to a 5.0. That's what happened. So converted 5.0, and 5.0 plus 3.8 is 8.8. Okay, perfect. The other thing I wanted to mention is actually this type of conversion here that we call sometimes explicit conversions isn't limited to numbers. We could also do it in strings as well. So var my string, and this is of type string, and I'm going to give it a value of 4.5. So I could actually add 4.5 here. So my string, so I'm going to convert it to a double. I'm going to type in my string here, and now this will convert. Of course, this needs to be a string. Okay, give it a second and it should do the conversion. Perfect. So we got this error here. What is this telling us? This tells us that my string here has a string. We don't know what it is, and I'm trying to convert it to a double. What I could do here is I could force unwrap it, and it could fix it for you. And you force unwrap it by putting in the exclamation mark. So I'm going to go ahead and force unwrap it. And essentially, this is forcing whatever the string is to convert to a double. Okay, and now it's a 4.5, adding 3.8 plus 5, you get 13.3. The trouble with this, and be very, very careful in using this, you're force unwrapping a string into a number. Well, this string just happens to have a number that could be converted perfectly and beautifully and cleanly to a number. But what happens if I had some numbers here? I'm force unwrapping this now to convert to a number, and obviously I'm going to get error. Execution was interrupted. Why? Because the Swift compiler doesn't know how to convert 4.5 FGDFG to a number. There is no such number. So when you are force unwrapping a string into a number, make sure that the string is a perfect, beautiful number with no other characters that would confuse the Swift compiler. Okay? All right, that's perfect. So that's really intro to numbers and explicit conversions. I also want to cover one little thing about Boolean. And as we all know, so I'm going to go ahead and create a variable here. My Boolean variable, and obviously it's of type bool, and I'm going to give it a value of false. Now, as we know, Booleans can only have two values, either false or true. The one thing I want to talk about in terms of Boolean is the exclamation mark, which is different than unwrapping here. The exclamation is used differently here, and essentially we use it as a toggle operator. So check this out. So if I go my Boolean variable, and this should have a value of false right now. If I were to change it, my variable Boolean, I'm going to give it a value of true. It has a value of true now. I've changed the value. What Booleans are really used for is for marking something, marking a state, or flagging something in a game or any application. Sort of like switching, right? Because it has two values, it can switch. So if we want to toggle something over, this is a really useful way. So check this out. So my Boolean variable equals exclamation mark, or the not, or the toggle operator. Essentially, it's the inverse of what the value is. I'm going to type in my Boolean variable here again. So remember, the last line, my Boolean variable was true, and now I'm toggling it back to false. So now if I print my Boolean variable, it should be false. And here we go. It shows that this is false. The reason it shows that this is false, because I've actually toggled it using the exclamation mark. So the exclamation mark, the toggle operator or the not operator, essentially inverses the value of what this is. Since this was true, I'm inversing it. So whatever the opposite of true is, which is obviously false, and I'm giving it to this variable. So this becomes really handy to quickly toggle a Boolean value that you have between true and false, using it sort of as a switch. All right, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.